Big news coming out of Toronto. A veteran NHL broadcaster is calling for a massive shakeup in the Maple Leafs roster, including potentially letting go of some of the team's biggest stars like Mitch Marner, John Tavares, and even Austin Matthews. Could this be the end of the Leafs core as we know it? Stick around as we break down exactly what was said and what this could mean for the future of the franchise. But before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the latest NHL news and updates. Let's get into it. Veteran broadcaster urges Toronto Maple Leafs to consider drastic roster overhaul. Speculation continues to grow around Mitch Marner's potential departure from the Toronto Maple Leafs, as many analysts believe the forward may leave in free agency. With his contract nearing its end and after yet another disappointing playoff exit, major changes to the lineup seem both logical and risky. The team could lose key talent without a clear path to immediate improvement. However, veteran broadcaster and producer Shannon believes the team should go even further, suggesting a complete reset involving the franchise's core players. Speaking with David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period and NHL Network on Leafs Morning Take, Shannon didn't hold back when asked about the team's future. When the topic of possibly trading defenseman Morgan Rielly came up, Shannon explained that he's more critical of how the team's stars have performed. After speaking with sources close to the organization, he made his position clear. I would not re-sign Mitch Marner. I would not re-sign John Tavares. I would consider trading Austin Matthews. He also noted that he'd sit down with Rielly to discuss whether he truly wants to remain with the Maple Leafs. Is it time for the Maple Leafs to blow it all up? According to Shannon, Toronto should consider dismantling the core group almost entirely, with William Nylander being the only major piece worth retaining. Letting Marner and Tavares leave as free agents, while trading Matthews and Rielly, would free up roughly $40 million in salary cap space heading into next season. This dramatic overhaul would effectively strip the team of its most recognizable stars, leaving a new foundation centered around Nylander, Matthew Knies, once re-signed, Jake McCabe, and Chris Tanev. From there, General Manager Brad Treliving would face the challenge of rebuilding the roster with whatever assets he could acquire in return for Matthews and Rielly. But what kind of return could Toronto expect? Recently, Jason Gregor and Frank Saravalli discussed Erik Karlsson's situation in Pittsburgh, with Saravalli stating he would trade Rielly straight up for Karlsson, a move that would immediately bring an elite defenseman into Toronto's core. That said, Pierre Lebrun of TSN was asked whether the Leafs would even approach Rielly about waiving his no-trade clause. His response: no chance. As for Austin Matthews, it's unclear exactly what a trade package for him would look like, but it would undoubtedly involve multiple valuable assets. However, Matthews also holds a no-move clause, adding another layer of complexity to any potential deal. Is a complete roster reset even realistic? Despite Shannon's bold proposal, a full teardown of the roster is highly unlikely. Not only would Matthews and Rielly need to agree to waive their no-trade protections, but the Leafs would also need to find teams willing to take on their substantial contracts. The success of any such plan would also depend heavily on the returns Toronto could secure through these trades. While frustration looms after another season ending in playoff disappointment, it's important to remember that this is not a bad team. The Maple Leafs finished first in the Atlantic Division and pushed the eventual Eastern Conference champions, the Florida Panthers, to a hard-fought Game 7. Attempting to rebuild the roster in a single offseason by moving out most of the team's top players is a massive gamble. The real question is, could the Leafs actually emerge as a better team next season by following the drastic course of action Shannon is advocating? Veteran broadcaster and producer Shannon appeared on Leafs Morning Take, a show hosted by David Pagnotta from the Fourth Period and NHL Network. During the discussion, Shannon was asked about the future of the Maple Leafs core players, and he did not mince words. When asked specifically whether defenseman Morgan Rielly might be on the trade block, Shannon didn't stop there. He made it clear that he would not re-sign Mitch Marner or John Tavares and would even consider the unthinkable, trading Austin Matthews, arguably the face of the franchise. He also mentioned that he'd have a serious conversation with Morgan Rielly about his long-term commitment to the team, questioning whether Rielly still wants to be a Maple Leaf at this stage of his career. Now, let's pause here. That's a massive statement. We're talking about dismantling the core that the Leafs have built over the better part of a decade. But why is this conversation even happening? Well, it comes down to yet another disappointing playoff performance from the Maple Leafs. Despite having one of the most talented rosters in the NHL, Toronto once again fell short in the postseason. For a team with such high expectations, falling short year after year creates enormous pressure, not just on the players, but also on management and ownership to make big, bold changes. Mitch Marner, for example, is entering the final year of his contract and will be an unrestricted free agent, UFA, after the upcoming season. The same goes for John Tavares, who has a hefty contract but has seen his on-ice performance decline slightly with age. Auston Matthews, meanwhile, just signed a massive extension, but his deal includes a no-move clause, making any potential trade incredibly complicated. The Leafs core, often referred to as the core four, Marner, Matthews, Tavares, and William Nylander, has been together for several seasons now, and while they've had regular season success, it simply hasn't translated into playoff victories. The big question now is it time to accept that this core just isn't going to get the job done? John Shannon's proposal is as radical as it gets. In his view, the team should allow both Marner and Tavares to walk in free agency, effectively clearing their salaries from the books. That alone would free up a significant chunk of cap space. But Shannon takes it even further. He suggests exploring trade options for both Auston Matthews and Morgan Rielly. If both of those players were to be moved, along with the departure of Marner and Tavares, the Leafs could potentially clear around $40 million in salary cap space. That would be an almost unprecedented level of turnover for a team that just made the playoffs and finished near the top of the Atlantic Division. Shannon did say that he would keep William Nylander as a foundational piece, along with Matthew Knies, assuming his re-signing goes through, and Jake McCabe and Chris Tanev, two important pieces on defense. From there, the general manager, Brad Treliving, would need to rebuild the rest of the roster through trades and free agent signings. So, what could Toronto realistically get in return if they were to trade their stars? Well, there are several factors to consider. First, as mentioned, both Matthews and Rielly have no-move clauses in their contracts. That means they would have to approve any trade, which significantly limits the number of potential destinations. But hypothetically, if Matthews were willing to waive his clause, the return would be substantial. We're talking about multiple first-round picks, top-tier prospects, or even established NHL players. Matthews is one of the premier goal scorers in the league, and teams would line up for the chance to add him if they can make the cap space work. As for Rielly, there has been some chatter about possible trade scenarios. For example, Jason Gregor and Frank Saravalli discussed the idea of swapping Rielly for Erik Karlsson in Pittsburgh. That would be a blockbuster deal, bringing in another high-end defenseman to Toronto. However, when Pierre Lebrun of TSN was asked about whether the Leafs would even consider asking Rielly to waive his no-trade clause, he responded with a firm no chance. So, while the idea is interesting, the practical reality of moving these players is far more complicated. Now, let's get real for a second. Is a total roster teardown even possible for the Leafs? The short answer is, probably not. Here's why. Both Matthews and Rielly would need to agree to be traded, and that's a big ask, especially for Matthews, who just signed a contract extension because he wanted to stay in Toronto. Then there's the question of whether the Leafs could even find the right trade partners, teams that not only have the cap space but also the assets to make a fair deal. And even if all that somehow worked out, there's no guarantee that the players they bring in would be able to match or exceed the performance of the current core. Let's not forget, this is not a bad team. They won the Atlantic Division and pushed the eventual Eastern Conference champion Florida Panthers to a Game 7 in the playoffs. Completely gutting the team would be a massive risk, with no certainty of immediate success.